Hi, welcome to the next edition of 3. I'm going to try to do mostly 3 per video. 3 meta decks that you could play on a budget. So like I said, these decks have either 8 rares, and in one case, today, one deck has 4 mythics. So we're going to get into each one of those decks. The one with the 4 mythics, I think, is definitely the upper tier deck. So out of the 3, like this is the upper section. I wanted to feature it because, for one, it's different than the others that I've featured so far. So I kind of wanted to showcase that deck a little bit too. And the other 2 decks are going to be a little bit more aggro-centric. So, because they're traditionally, you could build aggro more on an uncommon common budget than something like mid-range, where the actual card quality of the threats matter more because you have a lot more target removal and card advantage pieces, which are also usually rare. So, yeah. So like I said, I have 3 decks. Next week, I'll have another 3. I already kind of built, I think, I have 2 decks already lined up. One of them I think already made. And I have another one that I think that's going to be pretty easy to make it on the 8 rare budget. So let's get into the 3 and discuss. Before we do, though, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe, hit that notification in order for future videos. We're on our way to 1,000 subs. Let's get there together. If you're interested in the tournament series, make sure you look in the link in the description for 1, to join the Discord, and 2, look at the Patreon for ACG. Let's get into the deck list. So the first one has the 4 mythics. So Kaido, is an insane card. So this is the Ninjas deck for Pioneer. It's definitely upper tier 1. So we had to make some huge cuts here, but I think that's okay. Like I said, we have 4 Kaidos, which is just a really good card advantage engine. It really helps push our deck over the top. So we have our 4 Miscreants. We do have to cut on the Mockingbird. So if you do get some rare wild cards, I would invest in Mockingbird. Also the mana base first. You don't really need Brazen Borrow as much. But I would recommend doing that. We have 3 Ornithopters, 4 Miscreants. We have our 3 Sailors. This is not normally in the list, but we're going to run 3 instead of the Mockingbird. We are up our count of Sirens because of no Mockingbird. Drowner is played in the deck, and Hacker is really good in the deck as well. Silver Fur Master not normally makes the cut, but sometimes, like in this case, we're on a budget, so we are trimming back a little bit on our rares here, but pretty reasonable. Duress normally Thoughtseize, but Duress is suffice. It should cut most of the jobs done. Fatal Push, go for the throat. Pretty stock stuff. Dimir gets our best cycle for dual lands for the budget series. We have 8 Island and 6 Swamp and 4 Murky Sewers. You could up for some of the other common duels, or maybe even something like, because normally I think we also play Mutavault. You also could just play some Field of Ruins. It might be a nice little substitute there as well. Those are also uncommons. Sideboard, a lot of these are actually in the list that I've seen that this deck was looking at when I made it. So Dreams of Steel and Oil was still there. Lantern of the Lost. Normally you would be playing Leyline of the Void. But again, we are cutting back on rares. Spell Pierce, really good in the deck. Anoint with Affliction. Really good against Rakdos Prowess, where their best threats have die triggers. So exiling them is preferred. Stroke, really good card. Again, we cut on our Leyline of the Void, so instead we're playing Go Blank because it's Graveyard Hate, and it also helps against other matchups where the discard 2 actually matters. And instead of something like Enduring the blue one, Curiosity, we're going to be playing some Oath of Jace. Normally this deck plays 1 Enduring, but I went to Jace. I think the card actually pretty reasonable in the deck. Comes down, draws 3, discard 2. Pretty fine effect. In the matchups, we want some card advantage and grind. But also with Kaido, each turn we could scry 1, which is not a terrible effect for an uncommon. So you definitely get some little bit of discount here. I think this used to be a rare, but yeah. So I actually like this as a starter section. So like I said, when you do the upgrades, target the main board first. Sideboard comes after the fact, because at least if you can increase your chances of taking game 1, game 2, and game 3, you just need to win 1. So most of the time, if your main deck is fully optimized, should be able to get 2 matches or 2 games. Yeah, definitely look into the main board first, and then just the sideboard for Leyline of the Voids. Mana base I would target first, honestly, because it can help you with other decks as well if you're looking to do Dimir and other things in Pioneer, like maybe even Dimir Demons for a possibility. So mana base should always be your first target, just because they are used across multiple decks. And having a bad mana base can cost you more games, I think, than having a slight weaker creature than a Mockingbird and having a Sailor there, or a Siren. it's probably not going to be as impactful as your mana. So that's the first list. Let's get into the second. So second deck on my radar here is the Boros Convoke deck. Now, for the most part, the creature package in the main, we get a lot of them. We do cut back on 2 of the rares and have 2 Sacred Foundries. You definitely could trim back on some Loxodons if you want to increase your Spirits and your Sacred Foundries to make your mana a little bit better. But overall, we do, for the most part, hit our namesake things. The only rares we lose is the 1-drop Warden of the Inner Sky. Instead, we're playing this Frontliner, which is honestly the last card I would touch, because usually that's your backup plan. Your main plan, of course, is Knight of Errant of Eos and the Loxodon. So these two, you should add your 2 copies, which takes away from your Spirits. This is a nice little substitute for making more dorks, which really synergizes with Recruiter. Recruiter is a really good card for the uncommon slots. We have Cases of the Gateway Express, pretty reasonable removal spell, a couple more on the board, because we don't really have the ability to play Get Lost, but still a reasonable removal spell. Mana base, again, we take a huge hit here. Like always, I recommend the Duskmourn dual land for the common cycle. I think it's the best cycle ever printed, unless you're particularly wanting life gain or crimes. You have to actually want those things to actually make it better than this one, especially since we are in an aggro deck. We can easily get our opponent lower than 13, so keep that in mind with aggro decks. But other than that, we have, 16 basics. Not very optimal there. Again, you could play some number of Field of Ruins to make sure that we can get rid of their best land and we get a basic that we want for the color choosing. Sideboard, we get Deafening Silence, which is really good against Phoenix. Lotus Field, really important. Forge Devil, pretty good against Elves and little 1/1s, or 1 toughness dudes. Lantern of the Lost for Graveyard Hate. This normally would be Rest in Peace. Running Volley, the deck plays it most of the time. Like I said, Case is normally the Get Lost. We also usually play a few copies of the Battle that exiles a card from your opponent's hand. But in substitute, we're going to be playing some Raids, which is nice artifact and enchantment removal. And also, you could pump our Dorks, like a mini Loxodon. We have a Frenzy to get rid of a medium-sized threat, like a Sheoldred and whatnot. So that is our Boros Convoke deck. I think this deck is pretty reasonable. Next week, we'll be featuring a different Boros deck. The one that I've actually played and tested a lot for RCQ seasons. I also tested the upgraded version of this one too, but, you know, I definitely think this one's more, I think, upper on the meta than the one next week, so keep that in mind. So this deck is actually, I think it's like around over 50.5% on the meta. It's definitely not over the 1%, but it's still a reasonably mid-tier 2 deck. So we're going to get into the next deck, which is, I think, a little bit higher up in the meta than this one. Let's get into it. So next on my list is Mono White Humans. We do get some huge losses here. Instead of Get Lost, we get Obfuscation. We have a couple on the side. 2 for artifacting for planeswalkers and creature removal. We still get to play Brave the Elements, which is a reasonable card for this deck. Now, we also lose out on the 1-drop Hopeful Initiate. Instead, we have to play a little bit more Veteran Survivors and some Boros Elites. But Bodyguard, Officer, pretty reasonable cards. Eventually, you might want to get Kythian, now that it's on Arena. We are playing the Vanguard, but we do lose out on Thalia, which is a huge component to this deck. So if you can get Thalia, I would probably recommend getting that first. Then you could start looking at your mana, Get Lost, or the Hopeful Initiate. And also Brutal Cathar, right? Because we're playing Banisher Priest, which is a human, but it's not a very good human. The rares we are devoting to are our best rares in the deck. 4 Adeline, 4 Thalia's Lieutenant. These cards are just really good humans. They're your really good payoffs. Alone, they can help you close out a game. So sideboard, we get Lantern of the Lost, which is our Graveyard Hate instead of Rest in Peace. 3 Portable Holes, usually you play about 4 of these. But I want a 3-2 split with Obfuscation, because Obfuscation also can hit Planeswalkers, which could be relevant. Cathar Commando is our artifact and enchantment removal. Apostle of the Purifying Light is a reasonable uncommon that 1 acts as a little bit of Graveyard Hate, 2 can't get Fatal Pushed or any kind of black base removal. That's kind of nice. Sun Blessed Healer is our pseudo card advantage engine. So it comes down for 4 mana, you can get back a Thalia's Lieutenant or a Vanguard, which allows you to get a additional bonus. So this is kind of like our mini worse version of the 3-drop rare, that when ETBs you get a 2-drop and put it on the battlefield that can't attack or block. So instead this is 4 mana, a little bit worse, and 1 less toughness than this, the other card, but for an uncommon, this is actually pretty solid. And then we have Sunset Reveille, which is a nice little card that we can get And it gives us 4 life if, against an aggro deck. Mainly, we're probably playing this for the last mode, though, for card draw, a little bit of that. But this is a very, card that could be in multiple matchups. You're not really mad about it. If your opponent has more creatures, you get 2 1/1 humans, which synergizes with the deck. If they have more cards than you, you draw a card. If they have more life than you gain 4 life. So it's a little bit of mixture of effects depending on the matchup. I wanted a card that could be utilized in multiple matchups depending on where you feel comfortable with. So this is actually, I think, a reasonable budget option. Like I said, our 8 rares, like I said, all go into our best creatures. Thalia is probably the next target. So you can cut the Hollow Blade. Also probably cut back on some 1-drops. Probably the Boros Elite. And then you should be pretty reasonable. So let me know in the comment section what you guys think about the series. I definitely want to make sure I record another one of these as fast as I could. Just because I did notice that a lot of people like this series. I got a lot more reviews. So if you are watching this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It really goes a long way helping out the channel. Make sure that this video gets pushed out to more people. And also a like also really helped for impressions. But until next time, we will talk about the next 3 decks. Next week. Also tomorrow I should drop, I believe, I don't know if it's episode 1 or if it's episode 3 of either Dynamite or the Black-White Vampiric Hunger, which I think, so one of those 2 is tomorrow. Come back for that episode, because I do think I'm going to be covering a lot of different budget strategies in the format. Like I said, upgrading your starter decks, building new decks that maybe interest you, like Stompy. I want to make a Stompy deck, but it won't be meta. So I might make a series of 3 off-meta decks, just because I want to be able to build a deck I think is really good, but it's not meta by any metric, just because of that fact that there's no translation for it. But you do get access to 8 elves, which is really strong. So, but until next time, hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you guys next time.